So this video is about making the base. This bit's quite important because if we get this bit right, then the whole of the cylinder will be sturdy. I've chosen to use porcelain paper clay as an introduction to porcelain for children, purely because it's stronger with the fibres of paper in it, and it's also easier to use. Once something dries out, we can actually add wet to dry, which helps the process of making quite considerably actually. Some of the basic equipment you're going to need: two rulers which act as a guide for when you're rolling out the paper clay so that it's the same thickness, a rolling pin, a knife, some water, pins just to make some more marks, and brushes just to wet your clay. You're going to need something to roll the clay out onto. Don't roll it straight out onto the table because it will stick, and when you try and pick it up it will deform the form of the pot. This is oilcloth, which is my old tablecloth. I roll on on the rough side and the shiny side down. Open up the bag, stand it on its end and cut the top off, a slice off the top, and then you cut that into 3 portions. If you're using a knife, just make sure it's a blunt kitchen one, that's all. Okay, so make sure that your spaces are ready and that you don't need to get up and move around and pick anything up. Just I tend to make sure that the children are ready, sort of I call it setting the table. And all I've done is pick up one of those portions of clay, and I worked it around in the palms of my hands into a circle. And now I'm using my thumb and my fingers in both hands together. Sometimes I ask the children just to close their eyes and work it around into a circle. So we're just making a flat, we like to call it a cow pat. It's like a cow pat. And now all I'm doing is rolling it out. So I begin to use the rolling pin. In a minute I'll use the rulers to make sure that they're the same, it's the same width. Now this is going to make the base, and I have said that we aren't going to use bases. I'm just going to talk about that in a second. And again, using both hands, just work another portion of the clay into like a sausage shape. Okay, so once you have your cow pat and 2 sausages, what you're going to start to do now is roll out the longer pieces using the cloth, and we're making the strips. We're making the edges of the vase now. You can see I'm just getting myself ready and making sure I know where everything is. You can flatten it out by eye, which is what I'm doing there, or you can put the 2 rulers either side of that and you can roll it out so they are the same thinness. Because I've done it so many times, I tend to be able to do it just by the feel, by intuition, by eye. I'm using the ruler now as a marker, so I'm cutting out a strip, and this is what it looks like. So I've used the ruler just to mark out a width. So once you've prepared your strips, I would put a cloth over them while you're working on one strip, just so that the others don't dry out. I've used a biscuit cutter, or you could use a mug or something round to mark the base, the cow patty bit, so you know exactly how big you want the base to be. And I'm just very carefully placing the strip on the top. Okay, so this is what it looks like, bird's eye view. You can see that the strip is straight up at right angles from the base, and that the strip overlaps at this point. And a side-on view, I haven't fixed anything, I've just torn it so that there's like a thumb width of overlap. So I've just torn it off and placed it there. All I've done to those 2 ends to seal them is just pinch them together with a bit of water in between. Right, so you can leave that to one side for a minute while you roll out and get the next layers ready. It won't dry out too quickly. If you're worried about it, just put a cloth over the top to trap any moisture. But it's actually okay, it's quite workable, so you're not racing against time. All I'm doing here is rolling out another strip. Again, I'm going to use my ruler to get the same sort of width, just for uniformity, just at this stage, because children will find it quite tricky to fix wobbly edges together. What I'm doing here is just folding up the offcuts and putting them to one side. I'm folding them and flattening them so I don't trap any air, and I'll be able to re-roll those to make more strips. So I'm just preparing the next layer now, and making sure that those edges are straight and they go straight up. Try not to put any thumbprints in, and I'm literally just placing the next strip on top, straight on top. And this is where some of your children, you might just have to check that it is straight on top. And you can see that I'm going to close the gap of the next layer so that it isn't directly on top of the previous overlap. And you can see I've just left that open. I'm going to cut it straight down so we've got a straight edge. Just let that fall away, add it to the offcuts, and then I'm just going to overlap it. I keep on making sure that they're straight on top, and I'm not applying any pressure, so there's no finger marks. I'm literally just placing it. The less you touch it, the better, really, because it will dry out and you're more likely to get fingerprints. So obviously I've got to take a photograph so you can see it from a different angle. And I am literally just going to squeeze it with my finger. Sometimes you hear of potters cross hatching it and slipping them together. This clay is so wet and so strong, you don't really need to do that. So I'm just pinching it together, and you can see that I've stood up. I'm standing up and I'm getting a bird's eye view so that I can see that it's really straight up. You might want to just check this with a ruler. Now, between layers, the first layer and the second layer, I'm literally just pinching it together. It's okay when the clay is wet. As the clay starts to dry out, you might just want to brush some water around it. The clay is robust and wet enough that you don't really need to slip it, and the idea is that we see the layers in between. So the pinching is enough to fix it, but if you're worried about it, just brush some water in between and squeeze them together. So you can see the overlay here and how it fixes it all together. Keep checking this straight up. Sometimes I give it a little tug upwards just to see if it's going to fall away. And now all I'm doing is I'm going to attach the base to the sides of my pot. So I'm going to cut all the way around, leaving about 2 millimeters. So there's a little bit of an edge all the way around. And you'll notice that I'm moving the cloth and I'm not moving the pot. I'm hardly touching it. I'm folding up the offcuts again, so I want to use as much as I can. I don't want any wastage. It's too expensive and too brilliant to waste and throw away like usual kind of cheap clay. This we can use every ounce of. Okay, so I'm putting my hands inside, one hand inside and one hand outside. I'm using the knife, or just a kitchen knife will do, and I'm literally just applying a little bit of pressure like I'm spreading some butter, just going up. So use that upward motion, and it helps for the clay to become part of the sides. Now, we talked about not having a base so that we could get light fittings in here. Just ignore that because I'm going to work around it. I think this will make it a lot more sturdy. But what you do need to do is make sure that every little bit of that base is spread upwards. If the children don't spread it up properly, you will end up picking up a pot with no bottom. This also just makes it a lot more sturdy for the layers to join together. So again, I'm just checking that everything is upright and it's sturdy. Just small pinches, not enough to make an impression though. And there you have it. There's your base. It should be strong, 2 layers up. It should be fixed really well, and it should be straight. And now with that strong core, we can start to add the next few layers.